we're glad to have with us tonight a very special guest, Dr. Cindy Miller. Cindy Miller lives in New Jersey with her best friend, ministry partner, and husband, Stanton Miller. Together, they pastor Calvary Tabernacle in Wrightsville, New Jersey. She holds a Ph.D. in Pastoral Care and Counseling. Dr. Miller serves as a Professor of Practical Theology at Urshan Graduate School of Theology. She is the author of 5 books. She is a consistent columnist in Reflections magazine and contributes to other publication as well. She's also an international speaker, and we're glad that she's on this broadcast with us tonight. She was also my professor and my mentor at Urshan Graduate School of Theology and has been a great impact on my life. Sister Miller, it's such an honor to have you here, and you are in New Jersey, which is one of the kind of hotbeds of COVID-19 right now. First of all, how is your church? How is your family?
I think that being in New Jersey has certainly made us very aware that this is real. At a time when, some people were posting saying, do you even know someone who's sick? We're like, yes, we're actually overrun with them up here. So having members of our congregation that work in the medical field, we were very concerned. But, the faithfulness of God, it's not an ideal situation, certainly here, but God is faithful. And we did have one particular member of our church that was diagnosed. She's a nurse, but coming out of it never required a hospital stay. And to be able to say that only one out of our congregation in this hotbed environment, I am just so thankful. So overall, we're doing great.
Dr. Miller, this COVID isolation has caused families around the world to get much more up close and personal and than we're normally used to. Let me ask you, what are the challenges and the opportunities in being in isolation together?
I do think that for families that are primarily, they have good marriages, they're strong, they're connected. I think maybe the beginning, this, was like, oh, this is great. I, had reports of people saying we're reconnecting, we're having game night, this is so fun. But I'm not hearing as much joy now because the real life stressors have come into it. Boredom is setting in. And then no matter how much you love people, they can get on your very last nerve. There's irritation and then just overall disappointments, that are happening. But we also have situations where there are people even that we know that this has been an extremely difficult time for them. Maybe their home isn't safe. So domestic violence has been on the rise. And if there was, a problem in that area before, or even the threat of it, some of that is coming to the surface now. And just, I think as a pastor and yourself, you want people to know, I want people to know, if you feel unsafe, you need to get to a safe place. And I think there are resources available in communities. And I think maybe even contacting church leadership, if they feel unsafe, you'd be able to provide some resources for them.
Absolutely. I believe our church needs to be here to help and minister to the needs of our community. Someone who's in that situation, they may even be embarrassed to get help, but I think it's imperative that they seek out that help.
I agree with you. I think people are embarrassed, and even more so if we are, faith-based Christians, apostolics. We don't want to admit that we have some really ugly things going on at home. But regardless of our pride or our shame or whatever, if people are not safe, if things are escalating in the home, the number one priority is that people have to be safe. And so I cannot stress it enough. Contact your leadership, contact social service agencies, whatever they are. But definitely I know the church is a place to contact and say, this is a scary place for me, I need help. And there will be someone who could speak to that. But in between these happily married, strongly connected relationships, which are a few, and then these also, which are few unsafe environments. There's the rest of us, the ones who want better marriages, the ones that want stronger families. Maybe in some areas we're doing a great job, but truly recognizing that we have some growth areas. So the challenges that I think we're facing here with COVID-19 and stay-at-home orders is that the distractions are gone. Things that we hid behind busyness. Busyness is just a great place to hide. And so we can be really good people, going to work, getting the children to their school events, making time on the weekend for church, having hobbies, having the finances and resources to shop and eat out and do fun things, and really disregard that underlying current that's going on in the home. And unfortunately, sometimes the only time we want to deal with is when it explodes. So here we are, perfect time. Some of the distractions are gone. And in some ways, working from home, homeschooling, which you talked about, it's just adding some new types of stressors. But so yeah, different kinds of challenges. I think people that want to work on their relationships are going to. And I think that people that are content to hide will just use the new stressors, the new demands of COVID-19 to put their head in the sand, so to speak, and ignore it. So where's our heart in all this? That really becomes the question.
Yeah. Could you define some of those stressors? So for a family, for a married couple, and maybe, I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but maybe, as you said, that the COVID honeymoon is worn off, yeah. And I think it has for everybody now. And they've realized they're now kind of getting on each other's nerves, or they're beginning to lose patience, or they're beginning to maybe even lose their temper. What's going on in some people? Maybe just define some of the emotional things that may be happening that are causing some of that. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but where it's getting tense now, where it's starting to lose their temper, where they're getting antsy. What are some of those challenges that people are feeling emotionally?
Well, I think it's important to remember something, that we don't want to rush past and then just set ourselves up for failure. We are in a once in a century pandemic, and the emphasis is on once. I hope this doesn't happen again. So we are experiencing something that we have no personal knowledge of. We have nothing to fall back on. We have no current stories of success in this. We're just scrambling every day. And I think that has challenged us, even people who are saying, oh, I'm doing pretty good. I felt, no, this is all right. We're handling it all right. Underneath the surface, I think even those who feel like they're pretty healthy, there's some anxiety. There's, what does tomorrow hold? What's going to happen? And when the restrictions lift, what is that going to look like, and how are we going to handle it? So if you put a pandemic in a home that already has some minor stressors going on, then, of course, it's going to only exacerbate that and continue. So yeah, some of the stressors, we talk about it in marriage class. Finances, whether you have a COVID-19 or not, always generates stress in a marriage. And whether the parents are talking about it openly or just, stressing silently, that impacts the environment, what people are experiencing in the home. And I know here there have been lost wages and lost jobs. And so I know this is going on in our own church family as well. Even trying to get the assistance that people have promised doesn't mean it's going to be immediate. And so that always takes a toll, and people's emotions have just absolutely been all over the place. If you follow the news closely, you're probably feeling very discouraged because fear-mongering has been just absolutely out of control. If you follow social media, you're probably very convinced that everybody has got a better life than you right now. And we know that that's not true, but if, you know, for people that really believe it, you know, loneliness is huge right now. So you're thinking loneliness, we're all in a home together, but, you know, teenagers aren't with their friends. You know, we're not out and about, we're not going to church, getting those connections. So when you strip away everything, we're really left with, some people are not even in a home with family members. Their children or friends or extended family members are sheltering in place in their homes. So loneliness is on the rise. And, you know, in previous studies before COVID, you know, loneliness was almost at epidemic levels, and the impact on physical health, the impact on mental health, emotional health that loneliness has is just really, could be scary. But we know the Lord, and we could never put in place, you know, our relationships with friends and family and not make room for God. So I think in this time, you know, as positive as we want to be, and we don't want to waste this opportunity, and we want to grow, the health of families and couples is really going to be dependent on the health of the individual that's in that unit. And I think that if each individual is kind of caving into this sense of what's going on, that sense of maybe despair or loneliness or feeling unhappy or becoming very aware of what's not right in their homes, and they're caving into that. So the lonelier I get, the more I disconnect, and the more I disconnect, the lonelier I feel, and this downward spiral has begun. So I think that really when we're addressing it, if I was saying to myself, it'd be like, how healthy am I? You know, what am I doing for myself spiritually? What am I doing for myself physically? Am I taking short walks? Am I getting out in the sun when it, you know, when the days allow for that? Am I reading my Bible to have a meaningful conversation with God? Is prayer something I'm engaging in? So I think that the stressors are there. We're going to have to be kind to ourselves and realize these are very unusual times, and the way we would handle them, you know, even 8 weeks ago isn't how we'd handle it now. This is no time to engage in self-therapy at home.
Well, I think everything you said is great. And I know already you've begun to help people who are, maybe they're feeling the tension, they're feeling the anxiety and didn't know why, or maybe they just weren't able to articulate it. And you've given a number of stressors there, which I think are important. Now let's flip it, and maybe you can speak to both sides. But so in a home, family unit, communication, healthy communication during this time. So how do, if there is this tension, if the home is not the perfect home like we've talked about, but they're not the very difficult situation we've talked about, but there's tension, there's difficulty, there's some fighting happening, there's some harsh words beginning to happen. How could it be addressed in a way that is productive? How should couples respond to each other? You see where I'm going? How do we communicate? And you're just good at this. I'm setting you up because I know you're good at changing somebody's statement that is maybe a scathing statement into one that is a little more introspective and helpful. So maybe speak to how to communicate as families during this, and address what we see in our homes.
Well, again, going back to some basic principles. I mean, if we follow biblical principles of just relationships in general, being kind and encouraging, supportive, loving, if we just engage in the biblical principles that God has given us, we're going to be so much better off. We're better people altogether. I think that in homes and in marriages right now, each individual has to own their responsibility to make this time a better time and a healthier environment. You know, we have no control over people, but I have all complete control over myself if I choose to. You know, I could use my emotions as an excuse and, you know, default to it, but I do have the ability to have control over that. And I have to choose on days when things aren't going so well. I have to choose what kind of person I'm going to be on that day. And we're all going to have to take that responsibility. But how do we do that when things aren't going well? And some of the things that I'm going to share, it sounds so simple, but you know, people really want us to wave this magic wand and make it all disappear and fix the problem. And it's got to be, you know, either almost a miracle at the altar or, you know, a pill they swallow. But the bottom line is you got to do the hard work. It's you doing the work. So some of the things that I think we really need to be aware of right now is we're going to need to be kinder people. We are going to need to engage in patience and forgiveness and be as compatible as possible, because we are shut in these houses or apartments together, and this is unusual circumstances. In regular, you know, traditional marriage counseling outside of a pandemic, you know, we start off with, what is your goal? And the problem that I was always shocked to encounter was when it was the goal of a couple to prove they needed a divorce, not to get help, you know, like, because they were so focused on trying to show me how the other person was the problem.
Right.
But what if in our homes tonight we say, okay, I have no control over that. What is my goal? To get on the other side of this pandemic, to be the right kind of person, even in a very difficult situation. What is my goal? And that is to be the best Christian that I can be. And then how are we going to do that? Well, you know, obviously, if you're not good at communication before this, probably all these additional stressors is not going to make you want to sit down and have some kind of across the table heart to heart. But we need to share, even if it's simply, you know, the curiosity around the fact, am I overreacting? Is this anger because I'm scared, or because really I'm locked in a house with all these horrible people? You know, really trying to evaluate where your emotions are coming from and where they're going to go. So I think going back to, let's practice some kindness. Let's certainly engage in forgiveness and not assume everybody hates us and is doing what they do to be mean and to destroy us. Just some of the basic relational skills, the things that got us, you know, in families, the things that brought us to, you know, the altar to say I do before God and family, we need to go back to those same practices of care and sharing and love, and let's start laughing together again. Let's not make it all doom and gloom, but let's include some laughter back into our lives.
Yeah. I've been trying to coin a new phrase, because there's been so much of people turning against each other through this. I mean, people in our community are calling and reporting people meeting with their families. I can't share the story completely, but had somebody yell at me on a walk, just walking out, trying to get some nice fresh air. Felt like that at 75 feet, I was getting too close to them. And I'm calling it COVID kindness. We got to get a COVID kindness right now, and certainly in our homes as well. But when you realize what you just said is a lot of it is people reacting in fear. How does somebody know if they're being overcome by the fear? Does fear sometimes manifest itself in ways that we may not realize is fear, that we may not be identified? It's because we're anxious or fearful. What are some of obviously people react, right? They'll lose their temper, but are there other symptoms or, I guess, manifestations that are a result of fear that people could maybe look at themselves? You said we need to understand ourselves. What are some ways that people can sense what's going on inside of them?
Well, I think it starts with looking at how you normally respond in good circumstances. So on a good day, when life is good and things are well, would you behave in these certain ways? Certainly looking at, are you sleeping a lot more? Are you, eating, poor eating habits is just, connected to emotional distress. You just don't feel well. And when you don't feel well, a lot of times you don't act well. Not moving, people are getting in recliners and just staying there. And if you're not moving, that just bathes your brain and all those feel-good chemicals that we need. So you begin to look at your pattern of life and what's different. And so some people hide their emotions so well, even to themselves, or, they'll say, I thought I handled that so well, but then they notice they're having digestive issues, or they're waking up during the night, kind of tossing and turning, not sleeping well, which is so critical to good mental health, So I think, what do you normally do? What are you doing now? What's the difference? And that kind of will give you at least a starting point to say, I think maybe I'm not as calm and collected as I thought, or I'm not handling this as well as I thought. And it's just honest reflection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's excellent. And just to take that a step further, because I think this is a great conversation for people to hear. Last week we had your friend and mine, Dr. Jackson, on. He gave us some very some tools online that were the Who Five, but what you're speaking of is a little less of a test taking, but an awareness of one's own emotions. Now let's take that a step further, because I think this is good for people to be some self-awareness. What about depression? Is there an increase in the midst of this for people who maybe struggle with depression to go there? Is there a possibility for people maybe who didn't know they struggled with depression to be finding that out now? What I'm saying is do these conditions, are they conducive for people becoming discouraged and depressed?
Well, depression is a broad term.
Okay.
And so we want to be careful about, are we talking mild depression, moderate, clinical, it's just across the board. I think for people who already struggle with depression, this has the potential to take it to a whole new level. I think for people that have maybe been aware of it, but they were able to kind of collect themselves, do self-help, engage in practices that were, good for them, I think now is not the time to let those practices go. So mental wellness is so important. And there are many practical ways, even right now, that people can help themselves with mental wellness. And I'm not sure if Dr. Jackson was able to share a lot of that or not.
I'd love for you to speak to that. And I like what you're saying, because I feel like people today are very quick to self-diagnose themselves with depression. And one of the things that I've learned from you is sometimes it's burnout, sometimes it's other things that we are thinking we're depressed. And I'm not taking away from people that are clinically depressed. We did talk about that last week. We talked about medications and we talked about all of that. But what about people who are not depressed? They're just discouraged. I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Or what are the ways they can deal with that as you were getting ready to start into? I think that'd be very helpful for people.
I think a good starting point is really looking at what are my current habits that could be fueling these feelings of negativity, being down, darkness, exploring that. So as you know from class, we really look at your emotions, what's going on emotionally with me, what's going on, what are my thoughts, examining kind of your thought process. Is it all negative? Are you taking in a lot of negativity, whether it's on the news, which you have the power to shut off, the control, but it could be family members in your home, phone calls you're making. It could be so many sources that you're going to have to boundary and control. So you examine your thought process. And when we look at our thoughts and our emotions, what are we doing with it? What choices are we making? And those choices are played out in our behaviors. Well, those are all the areas that you can then begin to work in, because you know what, I can I can work on my emotions. I can identify that, okay, I'm really sinking emotionally because I feel sad because I haven't seen family members. So what do I need to do? Well, I could get on a Zoom call with my family and we could laugh and talk and be together. I could get some friends and we could have a game night. But mentally, maybe I need to challenge myself. You know, you need to read those scriptures and get the word in you to have those right kind of thoughts that are going to encourage and not discourage, or, you know, some of those things. Maybe read books that are helpful rather than feeding what's going on. You have to make the right choices. And I look at my behaviors. Now, if I'm getting up every morning and I'm not just, you know, and I know this sounds so practical, but routine really matters during a time like this. Getting up at the same time, going to bed at the same time, having a healthy breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you know, kind of trying to cut out sloppy habits. Bad habits are being engaged in right now, all in the context of self-soothing and, you know, justified by, we're in a pandemic, you know. And I think maybe right now, 6 weeks into it, some of these things are going to need to come to an end. We're going to have a little less self-soothing and a whole lot more doing the right things for the right reasons, you know. So I think there are things we can do to help ourselves. Take a short walk, get out in the sunshine, monitor your thoughts, monitor your emotions. But it all comes from a place deeper inside of us. And that's what kind of we look at. Are we driven by fear? Well, fear creates anxiety. Fear causes the sleepless nights. Fear could cause that short temper because everything seems out of control. And when you try to control the things that are out of your control, everything will seem out of control because we can't control this.
Right.
All we have is control over our own decisions every day. Wow.
You said we could control our thoughts. You said something to that. We can choose our thoughts, I think you said. Maybe speak to that a little bit. And also, you've mentioned it a few times throughout this about reading the word. Maybe speak to spiritual disciplines, because the book Spiritual Disciplines by Whitney, I've recommended to as many people as I can. But maybe just speak to the importance of spiritual disciplines through this, because I think at first it was easy to all of a sudden put spiritual disciplines in, but new routines have formed now. And I don't know that it's any easier for people to cultivate spiritual disciplines in isolation than it was before. So maybe speak to spiritual disciplines for a second.
I completely agree. I think one of the challenges is not that we have more time, but things have replaced, and actually, because it's not our norm, it feels more complicated right now than probably what it actually is. When I talk about our thought process, you know, it's so easy. I don't know if you're like me, but on a gloomy day, you know, and things aren't going really well, you know, I could be thinking, because, you know, I have 3 wonderful children who haven't called me all day. I could be thinking, you know what, they don't miss me, they don't love me, you know. You can just feed any kind of thought. Maybe my husband isn't feeling well and he's really quiet, and I'll think, oh, he doesn't care about me. We can imagine so many things in our mind. And so we kind of have to do a fact-finding mission with our thoughts. And that is this true? Is this true? Because I feel it doesn't make it true, because I think it doesn't make it true. What is true? And those extremes of never and always, well, you know, they always put me last, they never do this. Well, that's a warning sign right there. If you're using extreme language of never, always, and if you feel you're sinking into a real pity party, that's a warning sign. And so some of that reframing that you mentioned earlier, you know, just kind of taking those thoughts and asking yourself, is this true? And what facts do I have to back this up? And what is another way I could look at this? I think the controlling of our thoughts is not just so much, I'm going to get my Bible out and read a good passage and I'm going to feel better. And, you know, I think it's this decision, like, Lord, I recognize that I have faulty thinking today. And I need the healing, cleansing of your word to hit the reset button in my brain, because I need that transformation to happen in me. And so I think, yeah, we do have the ability to challenge ourselves and to really, you know, come alive in that sense of what are we doing? What are we doing with our thoughts and our emotions? Because it's playing out in our behaviors. So maybe if you haven't figured it out by examining thoughts and emotions, just look at what you're doing and then kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah. What are some of the gifts of conflict that could come about through this? Okay. Most people don't look at conflict and see anything good. I'm learning that conflict can be a gift. Mm-hmm. And so maybe give people something to look forward to, something to strive for, that reframing, what they can look at this conflict as accomplishing. Maybe let's talk about that for a second.
Well, because I am in the field of marriage counseling, I don't think people should be afraid of conflict. It's not the fact that we have conflict that's the problem. We're individuals. Of course, we're not going to agree 100% of the time. And if you do, one of you is not necessary in the relationship. So, you know, we're attracted to people who add to us, who bring something that's missing to us. We're attracted to that. And then if you wind up marrying that person, then you know, sometimes we laugh how people spend the rest of their married life trying to get them to stop or change about the very thing that attracted them in the first place. It's not, you know, to use a term people don't like to use, but, you know, it's not that you fight, but it's how you fight that matters. Conflict allows you an opportunity to say things that you wouldn't say in any other setting. It's kind of a, you know, let's get honest moment here that I think is invaluable if you're going to have a healthy relationship. So definitely conflict provides the opportunity to address the tough issues. And who, you know, honestly, doesn't everybody want a healthy marriage? I mean, really? I think people want to feel good. I think people want happiness in their life. We want to be healthier than what we are. No matter how healthy we think we are, there's always room for improvement. But the obstacle to that is I may be wrong. I may need to change. I may have had unrealistic expectations about marriage and about family life. And you know, that whole sense of, again, you know, what is the problem in marriage? You know, we have these expectations. So every disappointment is rooted in an expectation. And so we can sometimes get so focused on our disappointments and what we don't have and what didn't go right. And here we are, this isn't the marriage I wanted. This isn't the family life I wanted. That we're so focused on that, we never take the time to really examine what was I expecting, and kind of going back to that expectation. Was it even a realistic expectation? And where did we get off track? Because maybe there's time and room for a mid-course correction.
Wow. Let me change gears real quick, because I do want to address this, and everything you've said has been so helpful, of course, for everybody that's watching. But now let's talk about children and families. Is there any dangers that we need to be aware of or things we need to be addressing with our children?
Well, I do think that, you know, they are looking at, researchers are looking at the impact that this is having. Of course, you know, we're saying, well, children are normally in the home. They have their parent or both parents. You know, there's a lot of things that are going right still for children. Mm-hmm. But they are picking up on the fact that the world as we knew it is not the same. They're not going to church. They're not in their Sunday school classes. They're not at school with friends. They're not seeing, you know, the additional support network that they have. They're picking up on parents' anxiety. You know, children are very sensitive and they pick up on things even when we think that we've hit it so well. Again, I just go back to families need security. Families need to have routine. You need to be eating dinner as a family. You know, everybody being on their devices in their own rooms is not good. And that's kind of the default. You know, after the first 3 nights you try to eat dinner as a family, and then you're like, they don't want to because they're kids or teenagers, and but no, we need to keep routine as much as we can. They need to go to bed and have a good night's sleep. They need, I mean, this is going to sound really maybe disgusting, crazy, but people are reporting they're not even taking showers right now, or they're living in their pajamas, and I'm like, oh Lord, we have disintegrated as a nation.
Yeah. What sweatpants you gonna wear now? I saw someone online say they're changing their evening sweatpants to their daytime sweatpants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But just having routine. Parents need to be the parents, and really children need safety and security. They need to know that with every privilege comes a responsibility. So yes, there's privileges, but here's some responsibilities. They need to have have opportunity, but with boundaries. So this is home, and here's the rules, and rules don't change because we're in a pandemic. They could be adjusted, maybe a little flexible for our tough time. But home is what it is secure. Mom, dad, we're still the same people. We're not changing. We're going to have church on Sunday as a family. We're going to have Bible study on Wednesday night as a family. And for families who don't engage like that, it may feel a little awkward. And if your family hasn't, well, you need to make these changes regardless if there's a pandemic or not, so gather at the table and pray over your meal. I mean, if you're not praying at all as a family, this is a great time to say, Lord, not only bless this food, but bless my family sitting here with me. Help us to be the family you want us to be.
Wow. That's fantastic. I think that's great. Now let's take it to another step. What do you do about a child or maybe a teenager who's at home? You mentioned the teenagers that aren't connecting with their friends. What do you do with a child or a teenager that through this, or maybe they weren't before, but even now, they're not connecting spiritually? So you're trying to have church in your home. It's not working. It seems like it's not working. Their child or their teenager just is not connecting, and there's concerns. Obviously, we're not going to church. We're not able to get them to youth group. Speak to parents who maybe are concerned about that. Give them some advice or some hope.
Well, I realized a long time ago that I could take my children to church, but I could not instill a love for God in them. The best that I can do is live out my faith in front of them in a way that invites them into a relationship with God, because they recognize that it's the safest, best place in the world to be is in a relationship with God. But what I could do as a parent is I could make sure that my children were surrounded by an environment of spiritual connections. So yes, we're not able to get them to youth group, take them to church, but we can do that at home. So I guess my concern is when parents just abdicate that responsibility completely, like, oh, well, they don't want to sit in the church, in the living room with us and worship. Well, I'm really old school, so this may not go over well, but my house, my rules, I'm sorry you don't want to, there's a lot of things I don't want to do in life, but we learn self-discipline by doing those things that we need to do, not always what we want to do. So I can't make people love God. I mean, as a pastor, you've learned that you can't, if you could make people, you would have the whole town that you live in converted.
Right.
It's out of our control, but we create opportunities, and I think we live in such a way as to be an invitation to spirituality. But yeah, I just kind of assume, and doesn't really become an option in my house. You're going to show up. You may not pray. You may not want to be with the Lord. You may not want to do a whole lot of things, but yeah, we will.
Exactly.
We will.
Eating the food that you're going to be here for service. No, absolutely. And that's real. And that's what people have to do. And that's a little bit of our struggle right now, is kids who are leading homes, not parents who are leading kids.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that's, you said old school, but It works. It works.
Well, and I think we're seeing this kind of weeding out, because this is a time when people who have relied on others for spiritual nourishment rather than having it for themselves, now it's kind of coming to the surface that,
Right.
I got to get this for myself. I mean, this has certainly been a wake-up call to all of us. If it happened once, it could happen again. And, my challenge for myself and my church and my own family is, how well are we doing if we aren't gathering,
Right. That's tremendous. That's tremendous. Okay. So here we are, and all of our activities, the busy families, we were too busy for church stuff. Now we got it coming into our homes, pumping in. We were too busy for family time, and now people have had their family time and their game nights and their dinners together. At some point, this is all hopefully going to get back to normal. How do we, and just speak practically, how do we as families ensure that we don't get back to where we were before, where we're so busy that we've lost all of this connection that is available in the home? I'm talking families. How do we ensure we don't get back there? You can speak practically, you can speak, just don't get back there. But what do you think on that? We got there, and I don't know how we got there, where we were so busy, there was not time for anything. How do we make sure we don't get back there when the doors open back up?
Well, I think for people that have gotten a taste of what true, happy, content family life could be, I think it's going to be easier for them to say, you know what, I think there's some things that we can cut out. We talk about getting back to normal. I'm not sure that is a place all of us need to go back to, because what was normal may not have been what was best or healthiest or even most Christ-like. I'm hoping that the changes that some families, married couples are experiencing, they're going to yearn for more of it, that they've gotten a taste of what could be. So the very practical side of it is, just like businesses are making plans for reopening, just like as churches, we're all sitting down saying, okay, what is reopening our building going to look like? I think families, the parents leading, and certainly, the children, young adults, teenagers giving input, have to say, what have we gleaned? What have we learned? How have we grown during this time? What is it about this that has become valuable and precious? And how are we not going to lose that going forward? What are we going to do to keep this in place? And certainly it also opens the flip side of it. What did not go well during this time? And we want to put we want some corrective measures in place. So when this lifts, we're going to look into making those changes that became so obvious to us during this difficult time. But it's all of us being involved in that. And, pastor to pastor saying, okay, I can't overload the church calendar with things that separate the family. So saying, you know what, we're going to have more family time together, because everyone's really yearning for that right now anyway. Yes, we want to see friends, but I want to see my extended family as well. I want to see my church family as well. I don't want to get to church and everybody go off to their separate corners. So making space for it, it's very intentional, because when the doors open and the regulations lift, the pull is going to be back to the busyness of life that got us to the place we find ourselves in. So how intentional are we in creating healthy boundaries and holding to them, and learning to say no to things that are not good for our family or our marriages? Wow.
So there's some conversations that need to happen before everything opens back up, and
before.
Some plan. I love what you're saying about making a plan, our provincial government released yesterday their 3-step plan to reopen. I guess families need to make a plan. This is our step for getting back to normal, and not getting back to normal, really.
Not getting back to normal.
Staying healthy, really. Here's how we're going to stay healthy as a married couple. Here's how we're going to stay healthy as a family. Mm-hmm. Sister Merle, this has been a tremendous conversation, and any of these questions could have been a conversation all of its own. And we have to have you back to Belleville somehow once this all works out and we can do it, because you're helping families in our church. I want to leave you with one last question, and then I'd like for you to pray for our churches in Belleville and Trenton and whoever may be watching this. There's all kinds of people that are watching these videos, and just pray a prayer for the people that have been impacted by this conversation. But my question is this: as a counselor, you're a pastor, you're a mother, you just said you're a grandmother, as a parent, all these different hats that you wear. With all that together, what is it that concerns you the most as we go forward after this crisis? Or in this crisis, what is your greatest concern that you think about and you hope doesn't happen or does happen after this is all over? What would you like to see? And then just close by praying for the people watching.
Well, I think that my hope has been that we would grow, to be very thankful for areas where we're strong, but aware of those growth areas that we have in all of our relationships. And so my encouragement to my family and my church and in my own life is, let's grow. Let's not waste this time. Let's not look back on these weeks and weeks and weeks and have regrets that we didn't use it wisely. So, I've been really encouraging the people in my life to use your time wisely, come out of this with some gains. But people being people, my concern is the relief of, restrictions lifted, that what was so hard to gain will be so easily lost. And so, it really is, but it goes back to, just what I understand through counseling people. It's, people are going to do as much as they have a heart to do. I've seen married couples, they come in and honestly, their marriage is just so horrific that you just think there's no hope. And I'm their counselor, so I always want to provide the hope, but I'm thinking this is not going to happen. But because they want it to happen, and they invest in that marriage, and they forgive, and they love, and they repent, and build bridges back to each other, and they do a lot of hard work, they come out stronger than ever. And then I've had other clients who come in and they barely, I'm looking at them thinking, are you kidding me? What are you doing here? And they may wind up, walking away from the marriage altogether because they didn't want to invest. They, their self as an individual is more important than the relationship. And so it comes down to this: what do people really want to do with this? You can have experts in every field come and share their wisdom, their expertise, their education, but people have got to want to help themselves. And I think if it's lacking, then people need to really begin to pray, Lord, give me the want to, give me desire. The Bible talks, he gives us the desires of our heart. And I take that very literally. I'm like, Lord, give me a desire to pray. Give me a desire to understand your word. Give me a desire to be kind, and I think people need to ask God for the right desires. And that includes doing whatever it takes to be in healthy relationships.
Wow. Pray for us.
Lord Jesus, I am so thankful for Brother Stickler, for this amazing, wonderful church, and for the people of God who desire you in their lives. And I pray for every family, every married couple, the individuals who are watching, listening, hearing, gleaning from tonight, the sharing. Lord, grant us desire to be healthier, to be more Christ-like, to do the right things. We know oftentimes the right things, but we need desire to do them. I pray your strength and help and blessings in our life, and that not only are we encouraged, but that we are encouragers representing you well during this very difficult season. And we ask it in the name of Jesus. Amen.